You ever feel like it's weird when you want to get out into nature and you drive out to the middle of nowhere just to be crammed into a crowded campground with 100 other people with their noisy dogs and their tiny Bluetooth speakers blaring Katy Perry? Yeah, me too. If you've ever felt like this, you might want to think about trying dispersed camping, also known as boondocking. Nobody else around, no fees, no reservation, no rules. Okay, some rules, but no toilets. So basically the dream, right? It's my favorite way to camp because it basically combines the solitude and the benefits of backpacking with the comforts of car camping. Today, I'm gonna dive deep into this and go into what the heck is dispersed camping, how to not die when doing it, and actually even be comfortable. Some gear tips for doing it, especially when camping with kids, where to do it, and how to not get lost. I've got some great apps and tools for you to do scouting on your own. And lastly, how to not be that guy who ruins it for everybody else. So we got a lot to cover, but before we dive in, I just want to thank the sponsor of today's video, Foxelli Outdoor Gear. I'll come back to them a little later on in the video. For now, let's dive in. All right, so what is dispersed camping? How does it differ from traditional camping? Let's break it down real simple. Dispersed camping means camping outside of established campgrounds, usually on public land managed by either the U.S. Forest Service or the Bureau of Land Management. You typically won't find fire pits or picnic tables or RV hookups, definitely no Wi-Fi, no friendly campground host trying to sell you firewood, handing you a map and pointing you to the flush toilets. Think of it like this. Traditional camping is like visiting the neighborhood park. You've got the comforts, the crowds, a restroom close by, and everything is pretty predictable. Dispersed camping, that's more like finding like a hidden nature preserve in the back of your neighborhood. There's no fences, no signs, just a wide open space and like the feeling that you've escaped. You get solitude and freedom and the ability to eat bacon in your underwear without judgment from anyone but your wife. Ooh. So some terms you'll hear related to this. Boondocking is just another term for dispersed camping, often used for more RV style dispersed off-grid camping. There's dry camping, which basically just means there's no water and no hookups. And primitive camping, that basically just means you, your tent, and nature. So if you like peace and privacy, but still feeling like you're a wilderness survivalist, while your Yeti keeps your beer cold, this might be for you. So I feel like I've covered the pros a little bit. Some cons to this are that there typically are no reservations, which actually could be a pro because you can do it without having to plan ahead 6 months in advance. No bathrooms, again, could make the case that that's a pro. And no water unless it's straight from the river or lake. You filter it yourself. Again, could also be a pro. It requires a higher safety responsibility. Also no trash service, so you have to be prepared to pack it in and pack it out. Okay, next up we're gonna talk gear needed for boondocking dads. Some dad tested essentials for dispersed camping, especially with kids. You're gonna need a 3-season tent and a footprint, which is key and more important that you have the footprint when dispersed camping because typically you're not gonna be camping on top of a tent pad that's been worn down and flattened over time. You're gonna be out in more rocky areas or brushy areas where there's gonna be more sticks and rocks that could potentially damage your tent. Or a truck bed build or a rooftop tent is ideal for this kind of style of camping because it's obviously easier to find areas where you can just park your car when the ground isn't necessarily perfectly flat. Make sure you bring sleeping bags that are rated for the local temperatures of where you're going, sleeping pad or inflatable mattress. I'm not a big fan of the big, thick, Coleman, like kind of household air mattresses that are, meant to be like a temporary bed in your house for guests. Those can get really cold because that's a lot of air. They don't have a lot of R value. But I am a fan of a double sleeping bag or in a double pad if you're gonna be out camping with a partner or one kid. Those are great because you're not gonna be falling off the pad as easily. You can kind of snuggle for warmth, kind of luxurious. Typically what I'll do is throw the egg crate mattress down and put a furniture pad on top of that. Just makes it nice and comfortable. Definitely recommend bringing a tarp or a rain fly. I love this large rain tarp from REI. It's lightweight, small, easy to pack, but it still covers a large area. And it's great to have just in case because when you're going into the mountains and things like that, rain can be sneaky. And when you're out dispersed camping, you don't have a lot of places to go to get out of the storm. So this is a great way to kind of create some extra shelter for yourself. Okay, water and filtration. It's good to bring about 1 gallon of water per person per day. I love bringing my orange Home Depot water jug when I'm dispersed camping, especially when it's hot because you can load it up with ice before you go and it's somewhat insulated, so it'll stay cool for a couple days. But also cheap little collapsible ones like this are also great because they don't take up a lot of room. You can dump it out and store it much easier than you can those big orange jugs. Or if you've got a smaller vehicle and that's too much to haul and you're gonna be there for several days, I would definitely recommend picking up some of those giant, water jugs at the store. Those work great, the kind that have the little spout on them. That way it makes it easy for kids to refill water bottles on their own because they can just kind of open the spout versus having to like pick up a whole gallon jug or something like that. So cooking and food, I like bringing just a basic camp stove, propane, and side note, I love bringing our propane fire pit for dispersed camping, especially when you're in the fire ban season, which feels like it goes from like July 4th to Halloween these days. But that has been an awesome purchase that we've loved. Your cooler, look, don't splurge on a giant Yeti unless you do this often or you need to stay out for like a week at a time. One of those cheap igloo coolers, those are gonna work just fine for a weekend, couple days. And on the food, when you're camping with kids, bring way more snacks than you think you're gonna need. The kids are gonna run around and burn calories like crazy, and they're gonna be begging you for a Slim Jim in no time. And who wants to be out in the middle of nowhere and run out of snacks and have grouchy kids? Bring them lots of options, fun treats, good snacks. Everybody's gonna have a good time. All right, let's talk electronics. Kids love flashlights. Bring plenty of cheap ones that you can pass out and let them play with, that you're not really gonna care if they lose them or break them. Also, glow sticks are always a big hit and much harder to lose. It's funny, we're not a big screen time family in general anyway, but sometimes if the sun sets early and after dark, the kids want something to do, maybe they could use some wind down time in the tent. And for us, like sometimes bringing the tablet is a special treat for them, get to stay up late, watch a movie in the tent, and it can let you unwind by the fire and enjoy your whiskey instead of having to say no to another marshmallow for the 4,000th time. I mentioned earlier an increased safety awareness, and definitely would recommend having something like a Garmin InReach, especially if you're gonna be going somewhere where you're gonna be out of cell service. But you should always be prepared for that in these kind of situations because a lot of times you're not gonna have cell service. And especially if you're the only adult there with your kids, you want to have some way of, calling for help if needed. If you become incapacitated, your kids are there relying on you to keep them safe. So it's your responsibility to be able to call for help using an SOS device or something like that. I love the Garmin InReach. I'll link it below. By the way, I'll have links to all of these things in the description below if you want to check them out. Speaking of safety, first aid kits are especially important with kids. They're more prone to, boo-boos and owies, right? And I find that kids are like strangely comforted by a Band-Aid. They can have this like little scrape on their arm that does not need a Band-Aid, but somehow them getting to have the Band-Aid put on their arm stops the crying, stops the whining, helps them get back to playing. So bring plenty of those. Also, burn cream is also something that's, unfortunately, a common injury when camping with kids around a campfire, so that's always great to have on hand. Make sure you bring a shovel for one. You can put a campfire out with it, and for number two, because you can either bring like a portable toilet. They sell ones that are like, designed for this, but you could also just get like a 5-gallon bucket, Home Depot bucket, and line it with a pool noodle at the top with a trash bag inside. That works great for kids if they're kind of like sensitive to trying to go outside. I've always tried to teach my kids how to go in the woods from a young age, so they're kind of used to it, and it's kind of fun, to be honest. But definitely need a shovel to be able to dig a deep enough cat hole, 6 inches at least, 200 feet away from water sources, 100 feet away from a trail. 100 feet away? That sounds a little close. Don't get too close to the trail. Make sure you bring extra trash bags and durable trash bags. I would definitely recommend bringing like that outdoor, black trash bags or trash compactor bags. Those are super tough. The kitchen bags, sometimes they rip and tear. And like I said, you got to be able to pack out all your own trash. You're going to have to put this in your car if you don't have a pickup truck. So you definitely don't want this thing like leaking out inside your car until you can get back home. Dads, don't forget the duct tape. It's always a must-have. It can fix so many things. It's come in handy so many times. Don't forget the duct tape. Some optional upgrades. A folding table can make things feel much more comfortable, especially like one of those smaller kind of camping ones, but having a surface where you can kind of set up your cooking area. I mean, a tailgate works too if you have a pickup truck, but you can't always get the truck exactly where you need it. This way you can kind of set up an area near your tent or near the fire, wherever you want it. Super nice to have that. Makes it feel much more comfortable. Be sure to bring enough camp chairs for the kids too. If you're bringing a chair for yourself, they're not going to be happy just sitting on logs and rocks. They're going to be constantly trying to fight you for your chair. So just make sure everybody has their own chair, trust me. Another big winner for us has been a hammock. That's been super fun. It kind of keeps the kids entertained. Maybe get a little nap in the middle of the day while the kids are playing. Speaking of hammocks, you can get some awesome looking ones and affordable too at the Foxelli Outdoor Gear Company. They're the sponsor of today's video. And in fact, they have a ton of different gear items that I recommend taking a look at. I'll put the link below, but seriously, I don't know how they do it because they offer such a variety of different products, but it's all very budget friendly, which is key to outfitting your family with gear. When you got a whole passel of kids, it can get expensive real quick. And this stuff is not just cheap stuff that's gonna break either. It's all durability tested and it's built to last. I've been loving using their hiking poles lately. So has my son actually. But so far these have been amazing. So thanks to Foxelli for sending these out and thank you for sponsoring today's video. All right, so where can you do this? Where do you go when you wanna live out your Bear Grylls dreams? So like I said, typically this happens on public land, usually national forests or BLM land, some wildlife management areas, and even some state forest lands as well. So in case you're unaware, I want to just wet your whistle and show you what is possible. I'm going to go rapid fire through some unbelievably epic areas where you can camp for free with no reservations in all major regions of the US. So in the Southwest, you've got Carson National Forest, beautiful, quiet mesas, great stargazing. You've got the Sedona BLM land right outside of Sedona, Arizona. It's got Red Rocks vibes and it's got some amazing hiking. Moving to the Midwest, there's the Huron-Manistee National Forest in Michigan, where you can camp among the forest right on the lakeside. Down in Kansas, you've got Woodbridge Primitive Park, which has great fishing and quiet hiking trails. Up in the Northeast, you've got less BLM and national forest lands available to you, but there's still options that exist, such as Adirondack Park in New York. Definitely get some feeling of remoteness there. Vermont has some great wildlife management areas. Again, free camping in some lush forests. Can't beat it. Down south, we got Pisgah National Forest in North Carolina. It brings that Appalachian goodness. Florida has some great wildlife management areas with some incredible fishing. It can get wild, bring your bug spray, but it's beautiful. Of course, up in Alaska, you've got almost endless possibilities for this. This is like the creme de la creme of dispersed camping. Like we're talking seriously remote here and requires some serious prep. You'd be dealing with bears, severe weather, and obviously isolation. And then obviously you've got in the Western US, you've got the most abundant options available to you. But a few examples, you got the Alabama Hills in California. This is BLM land where you can get some jaw-dropping views of Mount Whitney and just a pristine, rugged landscape. In Utah, you get the Valley of the Gods, red rock spires, and just silence of the desert. In Wyoming, you know, just outside of the heavily trafficked Grand Teton National Park, you've got Shadow Mountain, much less traveled, comparable beauty. Colorado, you got San Juan National Forest, alpine lakes, pines, solitude. What more do you want? But with all of these, there's a catch. There are some rules. Ooh. Most public lands have a 14-day limit per site. You're expected to move at least a mile before starting your next stay. And beyond that, if it's fire season, especially in the West, there could easily be fire bans or even closures to certain areas. So check with local rangers, watch out for fire alerts. Some places do require permits, especially around national parks. Do your research, do your due diligence. And remember, if it looks like someone's property, it probably is. So don't camp on private land unless you want to have a conversation that starts with a shotgun cock. You'll want to use some apps to avoid those awkward moments, and we're going to talk about those next. Okay, so how do you find good spots? How do you know where to go? All right, this is where dispersed camping becomes part detective work, part dad superpowers. I've got some great tools to suggest to you here. So as far as free tools goes, there's an app which is almost free. It costs 99 cents. It's called the Boondocking app. This is a great place to start. It gives you some great areas in every region of the country, and there's thousands of crowdsourced sites posted on there with actual reports from people, up-to-date information, not necessarily like up-to-date, but there is potentially some helpful information that's been posted there within the last year or something like that that can kind of give you some tips on if it's an area you want to consider or not. And then once you kind of get a general idea of an area you want to target, then you can move into using Google Maps, satellite view, or Google Earth. This can help you really literally zoom in, find areas that have clearings. Sometimes you can even find established fire rings. And online you can find overlays to go on Google Earth that can show you boundaries for public land areas. But there's an easier option with that actually built in. I'll get to that in a second. But honestly, Google Earth is just best for getting relatively recent, high quality images once you are narrowed down into like site selection. For the overlays, I use a website called CalTopo. Also has a free version, gives you the terrain overlays as well as public land boundaries. It gives you off-grid routes to drive on as well as hiking trails. Honestly, there's so much to this app and it kind of blows my mind that it's free. Highly recommend checking it out. Hey there, quick wardrobe change. Had a little bit of a snafu with the recording and had the audio cut out on me from this point in the recording all the way to the end. So I'm having to go back and reshoot that. But anyway, getting back to the apps. The next one I wanted to point out is called Watch Duty. As I mentioned, you might have a lot of scenarios where there might be fire bans or evacuation notices or smoke and hazardous air quality in some areas, depending on where you're trying to go. Watch Duty is fantastic at keeping on top of fires, which is becoming an increasing problem, something that we have to deal with every summer, especially in the West. This is the best app I found. It's free, it's up to date, and it can show you exactly where the fire boundaries are as well as the evacuation zones and whatnot. All right, and there's a number of subscription-based services that you could use for scouting and things like this, but one that I recommend the most is called OnX. It sounds a little bit rich to say it, but it's truly life-changing. It can improve your outdoor adventures tenfold, help make things easier to do, find cooler things, and just help you with that whole discovery process, as well as helping you out while you're on the trail. So there's 3 different versions of OnX. There's the Hunt, which is I think their original product. I use that one a lot, but it has a lot of hunting related overlays that you may not need for just hiking or for scouting terrain. There's the OnX Backcountry, which is great for trails. It has a lot of like identified loops and, you know, popular hiking trails, things like that. It gives you some details on what the hike is actually like. And then there's OnX Off-Road, which is the one that I've used the least, and actually could be a great solution for finding dispersed campsites because it gives you a lot of information about back road, terrain difficulties, things like that. So you can know if you can actually get into a certain area with your vehicle. And so while I'm doing my e-scouting phase, once I've settled on a particular area and I'm getting down into the site selection, you can actually use OnX to like zoom down in. Sometimes you can actually find little campground areas. Sometimes you can see cars parked on there where other people have been camping. Sometimes you could see like established fire rings even. And what I like to do is identify about 4 to 6 different sites, and then I'll mark them as waypoints on X. That way you get to a site and one's already taken, or it doesn't have the right kind of terrain that you were expecting, or there's no water, whatever. That way you've got some options so that you don't just go to the one site you thought you were gonna get. If it's a bust, then you're kind of screwed and you're driving around aimlessly. I've got a few more tips on actual site selection. First, make sure you are arriving during daylight. You've got your waypoint, you drive to it. You gotta plan your trip so that you arrive there during the daytime because it just relieves stress, especially if you're going out with kids. You know you're gonna be able to find a spot. Things always look worse at night too. Everything looks scarier, you know? You don't want the big tree monsters looking at you thinking like this site's no good. Plus, pitching a tent at 10 p.m. is just a recipe for grouchy kids and stubbed toes and too much cussing. I said earlier, stay 200 feet away from water and 100 feet away from trails where you're camping. And remember, if you're driving around and you see a place that looks campable, it may not be necessarily. So use the tools, be smart, make sure you're staying legal. All right, lastly, I want to talk about how to not be that guy that ruins it for everybody else. How do you minimize your impact? Still enjoying yourself, but having some respect for the land. The way I see it, dispersed camping is a privilege. Yeah, we're all public landowners, but you know, with great privilege comes that's power. Well, you get what I'm saying. But we can't take it for granted because if too many people disrespect it, we're going to get locked out of it. It's going to be something that is taken away for future generations to enjoy. So that's why you want to make sure you're practicing leave no trace principles. So what does that mean exactly? It means when you're going number 2, make sure you dig your cat holes 6 to 8 inches deep and at least 200 feet away from water. Want to make sure you're only camping on durable surfaces. So that means like no alpine environments, not in meadows or in any kind of like habitat restoration areas. One that I see a lot is people burning trash that doesn't get consumed. It's one thing to throw a paper plate in the fire, but don't be throwing all your beer cans and, you know, Dinty Moore stew cans or whatever it is. That kind of stuff, it doesn't get hot enough to actually burn it. And so then you just end up with this trash sitting inside the fire. Critters come along and stir it up and drag it out. It's ugly and it harms the environment. Just pack your own trash out. Make sure you're not cutting live trees for firewood. That's definitely a no-no. I have to stay on top of my son for that one. You're allowed to cut down standing dead trees in most areas to use for firewood, but make sure you're not killing any live trees that you're cutting down. Be respectful of wildlife. This includes not feeding them. In some areas, you know, deer could be quite friendly. Obviously chipmunks and smaller things like that. Sometimes they'll come right up to you and want food, but it actually harms them by feeding them because they become accustomed to it. They can become a nuisance and then they become a problem. And usually means that, you know, they don't end up making it. So leave them alone, watch them from a distance, enjoy them from afar. Make sure you respect other campers. Just because you're not paying for the campground doesn't mean there's not other people in the area. You know, don't be blasting loud music on giant speakers or being rude or disrespectful when other people are in earshot of you. Like I said, not following these principles is going to lead to closures. I've found way too many areas that I've come across out in public land where there's just loads and loads of trash left behind. It makes it so that it's not enjoyable for the next person, and eventually is going to lead to access closures. So on that note, also be prepared to take out any other trash that you see. Bring a few extra trash bags, and if you do come across some trash that was there before you got there, do your part to go the extra mile and clean it up. It's a great thing to set an example of and teach your kids about as well. Some of the most beautiful places that we have access to are at risk right now due to overuse and poor behavior. And like I said, it could mean access closures, or worse, it could even mean getting the land sold off for oil or logging or mining. I definitely recommend that you, if you're like-minded, enjoy getting access to these awesome places, that you try to support some advocacy groups that help to maintain these lands, such as backcountry hunters and anglers. They work hard to make sure that these lands stay open and available to us to enjoy. All right, so wrapping up, why should you try this? Or should you? I mean, let's be honest, dispersed camping is not for everybody. But if you're a dad looking to get your kids out to spend some real time out in nature, under the stars, finding some time and space for some adventures, I'm telling you, this is where it's at. It's free, it's scenic, it's peaceful, and it builds resilience and some awesome memories with your kids. So that's it, dads. Now you're ready to go disappear into the woods like a boss. And if this helped you out, would you please give it a like, subscribe for more dad outdoor knowledge, drop some of your favorite boondocking spots that you've found around the country, and I'm happy to answer any questions or comments that you have. And if you want to keep learning more about this, check out this trip video I made where I go in depth on a boondocking trip that I did with my daughter last year, and I'll see you over there.